And welcome again, everyone, to the 31st meeting of the Culture, Tourism, Europe and External Affairs Committee. Can I apologise for our technical issues and our late restart? We seem to be broadcasting okay now. We have received apologies this morning from Oliver Mundell MSP and from Beatrice Wishart MSP. And I would like to welcome Gordon Lyndhurst MSP as Oliver's substitute. Welcome back to the committee, Gordon. Do you have any relevant interests to declare?
Thank you, Convener. My interests are set out in my register of interests and I have nothing to declare beyond that.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Our first agenda item this morning is an additional declaration of interest. I'd like to welcome Christine Graham, MSP, to the committee. Christine has replaced Annabel Ewing, MSP, a member of the committee. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Annabel Ewing for her very valuable and constructive contributions to the committee since she joined in September 2018, and I wish her well in the future. And I now like to invite Christine Graham to state whether you have any interest
I have no relevant interest to declare.
Thank you. Our next agenda item this morning is evidence on immigration, and can I welcome to the meeting Kevin Foster MP, Minister for Public Borders and Immigration with the UK Government, Stuart Ison, the Director of Transition with the UK Government, and Philippa Rouse, Director of Future Border and Immigration System Directorate at the Home Office with the UK Government. And I'd like to thank the Minister and his officials for their patience in bearing with us through these technical difficulties this morning. Before I move to questions, I'd like to invite the Minister to make a brief opening statement.
Well, thank you, Madam Convener. And it's a slightly reassuring to say it's not just the Home Office that has technical issues with video online meetings, but I very much appreciate the invitation to discuss this subject with the committee. It's obviously a pity we can't do it in person, but this obviously is the next best thing. And I just wanted to make some brief opening remarks before we get into the questions. And in starting, this has been a hugely challenging year for us all, and we will all have seen the start of the vaccination programme this week. It's a very positive sign for the future. And during this period, I believe we have sent a positive message out globally by keeping our core migration routes open, applications, creating the health and care visa, launching the new student and skilled worker routes, and seeing the EUSS reach over 4.2 million applications. As we look to the future, a key part of the recovery of our economy is the introduction of a fair points-based immigration system, which works in the interests of the whole of our union, from the Highlands to Cornwall and from Derry, Londonderry to Dover. The focus of the new system is to ensure talent from around the world can see the opportunities this country offers them and facilitate them coming to develop our economy and enrich our society, whilst at the same time ensuring employers prioritise investment in and training of domestic workers, not least those of our neighbours, including those who have made the UK their home over recent years, who are facing an uncertain future or a need to find new employment at this time due to the economic impacts of the pandemic. We are determined to ensure communities across Scotland see the benefits of our new approach, with a system which seeks to reflect the variety of economic situations across Scotland, which reflect those across the wider United Kingdom. We've engaged extensively on these issues with stakeholders across the whole of the UK, including throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and will continue to do so as the new system takes effect and as we review it in future. I do look forward to outlining how several of the changes we have made and are making to the UK system have been directly in response to issues raised across Scotland, which also reflects similar feedback from other parts of the United Kingdom facing the same challenges or looking to provide the same opportunities. In conclusion, the UK government's priority is to improve the lives of our citizens and help businesses thrive by ensuring our migration system is a support to our shared objectives of delivering a higher wage economy which invests in workers and ensures key staff are offered the opportunities they deserve by their employers, whilst also ensuring we can access flexibly and easily the skills and talents from across the world our country needs. Whilst I believe we will hopefully find a number of areas of agreement in this session, I suspect there'll be one or two areas we may disagree on during the session. That's politics. But our desired destination is the same, a successful Scotland, which is a beacon for talent across the world.
Thank you very much for that opening statement, Minister. As you know, this committee has had a long running inquiry into migration issues and how they affect Scotland, as well as looking at the future relationship negotiations. So we've taken quite a bit of evidence from stakeholders, and I wanted to talk about the evidence that we've received from different business sectors about their concerns about the UK government's approach to immigration. And I wanted to start just by quoting Rod Mackenzie of the Road Haulage Association, who we actually heard from very recently. And he said the UK logistics sector is heavily reliant on migrant labour, particularly from Eastern Europe. All the signs are that the whole Brexit conundrum has put a lot of them off. A lot of them have gone to seek employment in Germany and elsewhere. We are already seeing a big drop-off in migrant labour. It is estimated that at one point the logistics sector is short of 50,000 drivers. In Scotland, the figure is around 10,000, we think. The number increases when we include warehousing and other subsidiary roles, again, which are largely peopled by Eastern European staff. Our big worry is that the UK government has not added logistics-related roles to the shortage occupation list. Agreed salary thresholds, which are clearly designed to appeal to certain workers, typically university-educated and white-collar workers, has simply not helped. We think that logistics and road haulage in Scotland will definitely suffer from a skills shortage post-Brexit. And the only thing that is difficult to predict is just by how much. So that's a direct quote from Rod Mackenzie of the Road Haulage Association. Can you just briefly respond to that?
Still a positive net migration from the EU to the United Kingdom, and that's been the case as we go on. And we're seeing the very strong number of applications to the EU settlement scheme that suggests to us that people who have made the United Kingdom, and particularly Scotland, their home, are wanting to stay. So, we welcome that. And by the end of September, we've received 214,700 applications EUSS from Scotland. So, in terms of are people moving away, no, we don't see any great evidence of that. In fact, we're seeing evidence of actually much stronger applications to EUSS than many people predicted when it was launched. Turning to the issues of the road haulage industry, partly where our priority comes is that actually, in many jobs are ones that we want to see employers first of all focus on recruiting from the UK labour market, particularly when we look at some of the very worrying unemployment figures. And Madam Convener, you'll have obviously looked at the ones for your own areas and constituencies, as well as those across Scotland, as we see the impact of the pandemic on the labour market. Secondly, that a lot of jobs in that area are jobs that can be trained in a reasonable period of time. And again, we want to work with the industry and ensuring that the first priority is to try and train people into roles and work jobs they could be doing. And the idea that all of them are low paid is, I think, a wrong argument. Not all of them are. And again, one of the things we've said we will continue to do is to monitor and evaluate the situation as we go forward. But I think where we've said is that it very much should be the focus on first looking to get people back into work, looking to train domestically, having skills policies there, and also offering good and fair packages to key workers, rather than seeing immigration as the first alternative.
Right, thank you. He's saying they're short of 50,000 drivers. It seems that's a huge challenge to turn around. What specifically are you going to do to address that?
Well, one, I say it's already they say the issue, so that would be free movement and other things still running. But I think partly it's also what we're going to do in skills training to address it. If it's just instantly a question for immigration, then that rather also points to the fact that we also need to make sure we've got training and job opportunities available. And certainly, I know talking my colleagues in the Department for Work and Pensions, they're keen to look at encouraging people and getting people into more skills training. I'm sure the Scottish Government will be looking to do the same in the devolved areas around skills and education. That should be our first priority. And we do look, as I say, at the unemployment statistics. We quote, for example, 50,000. Just under 13,000 people were on unemployment-related benefits in South Lanarkshire alone in October. So there are some real opportunities to focus on the domestic market. We're prepared to work and understand. Again, we will review in the future, but I think all employers, we want to see that they're making the efforts in the first instance to recruit domestically and to train skills domestically, and that turning to immigration is when you can't genuinely recruit in the market. And many logistical distribution jobs that don't involve, for example, specialist driving licenses are ones that the vast majority of adults would do, for example, van driving and other areas.
I see. Well, it's not just the Road Haulage Association. We've also taken evidence from Paul Sheeran from Scottish Engineering, and he said before coronavirus, and aside from Brexit, the number one talking point in the engineering industry was skills shortages. We enjoyed the benefit of people in that respect. Companies from the very north to the very south of Scotland have enjoyed a relatively high proportion of such workers, not just in the skilled and super skilled roles, but down through semi-skilled and operator roles. If we add on top of that the additional administrative burden of trying to apply through a process, bring somebody in from a country from which there was previously free movement, we have another headache to add to the skills issue that has long been in our sector. I underline the point. He says, although that process will be in place and there have been moves to simplify it, it's still an extra step for SMEs and the very smallest companies, and he says it will be a step too far. That's Scotland.
Well, the first thing we'd say is that actually we're the much wider set of skills that are now going to be covered by the new skilled worker visa at school leaver level, and also very much broadening the appreciation of which skills qualify. In the past, it was very academically focused at degree level, which inevitably pointed it in a particular direction, whereas going to RQF3 has certainly broadened it out. We've also reformed the process, so for example, removing the resident labour market test, suspending the cap, which take out about 8 weeks on the process. And of course, these are rules that apply globally. This means you can recruit into the roles that qualify across the whole world. So that does actually have quite an advantage in areas where, in terms of recruiting more skilled. And again, yes, we do need to, as we say, in other areas, make sure there's a focus on skills training, make sure that employers are focusing in those areas, and also in supporting people back into work. But certainly we believe that actually giving people an opportunity to recruit skilled engineers in an easier way from across the entire world has many opportunities for the engineering sector.
Can I ask, thank you, can I ask, has the UK government estimated the increase in cost to businesses in Scotland who have previously relied on EEA nationals and now need to obtain a sponsorship visa and sponsor a person through the immigration system? Have you done a cost estimate on that?
Well, we published a detailed impact assessment around the impacts of the new skilled worker, and many employers who recruit, certainly at the higher end of, for example, engineering skills, were already sponsors under our existing system, and that's rolling over, and they'll get benefits from doing that. For example, we've rolled over licenses, we're not requiring people to renew, and the drop in terms of things like the resident labour market test and needing to go through the panel each month for a restricted certificate of sponsorship. And we accept there are changes to those who purely recruited from the EEA, and there will be an element of cost in there as well. But our focus has been that we are moving to a system where we have a global system of migration to this country, and that is part of it, and ensuring that there is an ability to have that system operate. And we're confident that it is a fair system. It is one that will allow and strike the balance. We've seen the evidence from the Migration Advisory Committee and taken it quite strongly in relation to who qualifies in the visas, and the drop in salary and settlement thresholds as well, which I'll come on to in a minute, which have been quite significant. So that's where we believe in balance that it actually produced the right solution for employers, that they can access many more talents on a global basis, but in the exchange we ask that it's now a single system.
Mm-hmm. But you haven't specifically estimated the increase in costs to businesses in Scotland from the short-term hit. I mean, you're confident that going forward you believe that there'll be skills training to fill the gap, or bringing in people from countries to fill the gap, but clearly they think that... We're
actually allowing people to recruit on a global level, a range of skills they couldn't recruit from on a global level until we launched the skilled worker visa a week ago. So there is a large change in the ability to recruit, and certainly the scope for recruitment now across the globe is much larger than it was under the previous skilled worker arrangements. But yes, if someone purely recruited from the EEA or those with general working permission in the UK, it will be a change. But the next phase of our modernisation process is to simplify and modify the sponsorship process as well, which will deliver long-term advantages for many businesses in Scotland.
I see. Thank you very much for that. I'll now move on to the Deputy Convener, Claire Baker.
Thank you, Convener. I have a couple of questions about pre-settled status and settled status. But first of all, can I just pick up on some of the issues raised by the Convener? It's a while ago now, but we did have the Migration Advisory Committee in front of us. And we were all, I think, quite taken aback by the approach that sectors such as agriculture and tourism, which are important to the Scottish economy, where there was a suggestion that part of them were dispensable, that if they weren't able to find employment weren't able to find workers within Scotland, that then if they didn't survive, that wasn't a huge loss. That kind of approach was of great concern to the committee. And the concerns we have are around, there are two sectors that are very important to the Scottish economy. The threshold for the skills migration policy that the UK government have introduced is too high to recruit the amount of workers we need within that sector. And there is also the issues with Scotland's migration needs, which the Minister, I'm sure, is aware of, that there are many of us feel, and there's evidence to support it, that Scotland's migration needs are sharper than most other areas across the UK. We have a decline in population. And so that we use the immigration system that we currently have. The free movement has been really important to these sectors in Scotland to support our economy and increase our population levels. It's just a response. We do have concerns that the current system that's been proposed doesn't really address those pressures within the Scottish economy.
Okay. Well, first, I can certainly reassure the committee and the deputy convener that I certainly don't view tourism as a dispensable industry. My own constituency, if anyone's looked it up, is about 40% dependent on that industry. So I certainly wouldn't endorse the idea that it's somehow dispensable. And also, we shouldn't paint the picture that it's all about jobs that are on the minimum wage. Far from it. There are many roles, and some of the roles, for example, chef and others, are now in the general RQF 3 will be able to be recruited more generally. I have to say, I do look forward to an era when tourism more generally is recruiting again. Certainly, we've seen the impact on tourism and hospitality industry across the United Kingdom, including in Scotland. The recent time has been strong and hard. There are, though, positive signs of investment starting to return, and we do welcome this. Again, I think where I would come back to is one. A lot of the jobs in the tourism and hospitality sector are ones where we would looking at, they're not run reasonably in the current circumstances. Expect employers to be looking for the more general skills that they need within the domestic market, particularly given the worrying levels of unemployment. We cannot allow there to be a lost generation in Scotland or in Torbay from the current situation. And again, getting people into jobs, particularly some of the ones tourism and hospitality can potentially provide, are a starting bed. Second, we will keep monitoring local trends.
Minister, if you mind, if I just in response to some of the comments you've made, you recognise that within Scotland we do have areas, particularly rural areas, where the population levels are particularly challenging, but at the same time that's where people want to go on holiday. And one way to sustain employment in those particular, we have areas, Scotland is pressure as a whole, but we have particular areas that experience greater pressures. So it's not always possible for a local workforce to be recruited because we have significant population challenges there that can't meet the demand there is for tourism in those areas. And that is why I think there is a feeling within the Scottish Parliament that we could be looking at some regional solutions within an immigration policy and not just a one-size-fits-all, because we do have concerns that it doesn't address Scotland's needs.
Well, first I'd say maybe worth looking at some of the unemployment figures coming out over the last couple of months in terms, sadly, which it was just in certain areas we were seeing some of those changes and issues. And also in terms of particular areas, and particular regional policies and similar pressures in some other parts of the United Kingdom about being able to recruit into certain roles and jobs. One, if we don't address the underlying issues as to why people have moved away from particular communities, then the next group of migration to come in, once they hit ILR, indefinite leave to remain, what's there to stop them doing exactly the same as what the previous generation did in those communities, which is move elsewhere? So if we don't really look at tackling the underlying issues, for example, is it digital connectivity? What type of opportunities? Also making sure there are well-paid opportunities as well, because again, if people hit 5 years, get ILR and then move elsewhere, that doesn't create the resolve a long-term those issues or those problems, and actually can in some ways even cement them. If people see that actually the only opportunities in the area are ones being created based on people what the attraction is to move elsewhere afterwards. I don't share that vision as being one that's particularly positive for those communities. But it is why, for example, we've changed the settlement figures quite dramatically, dropped it from in the mid 30,000s to the same as the skilled worker route requirements, because we recognise that actually where people do get a job, do settle in the community, we actually want them to stay, not feel that they should move to another part of the UK just to hit the salary figure for settlement. So we recognise there are unique challenges, but I'm afraid if immigration was the magic bullet, that would be a simple solution we could apply. It isn't. It's migration, attracting people to these areas is exactly the same issues as attracting job seekers from the Central Belt or from any other part of the UK. And that's where I think we really need to look at it. If immigration is seen as the solution to that problem, then unfortunately you'll be welcoming people in the front door as quickly as you're welcome as people are leaving out the back to head elsewhere once they get ILR or citizenship and therefore can work in any part of the UK.
I'm going to ask a question about settled and pre-settled status, but it's just as a final response to the previous discussion. If it was in Scotland, I believe we have such pressures on our population that if we move people from the Central Belt up to the Highlands in order to fill tourism jobs, we create shortages within the Central Belt in our care sector and other sectors. We have a number of sectors that are under pressure, and moving people around the country, I'm not convinced is going to solve that problem. But what I wanted to ask about was the settled and pre-settled status. It's an issue that's been brought to me by constituents. And you did express that this year has been different from other years, and obviously the pandemic has resulted in circumstances we didn't expect. My understanding is that has included people who do live in the UK, who are EEA nationals, who do live in the UK, but for reasons such as the travel restrictions or family commitments or job insecurity that's arisen because of the situation of this year, many have returned to their home country, but are unable to return to Scotland before the end of December or even into the new year. And I would like it clarified on the status of their applications. Can they apply from their home country, although their normal residence is the UK? And so they can apply. And do you know if that?
You can apply online.
I've heard that people are having
online.
Right, because I've heard reports that people are having problems doing that, but they are.
Right.
It's helpful.
Anyone who's got problems, we urge to contact the Settlement Resolution Centre or one of our grant-funded organisations. But actually, for the vast majority of people, it's a completely online application. Most people it takes about 15 minutes using their smartphone. But provided you've got residence in the UK prior to the 31st of December, you can. And particularly the vast majority of people who use their national insurance number, for example, as the evidence, because we can then cross-reference their records of employment from it. As long as you've got residence before the 31st of December, you qualify, you can apply from board. And certainly if there's particular problems, we'd be more than happy to look into individual cases. And as I say, the Settlement Resolution Centre is available 7 days a week on the phone if people have particular problems, or our grant-funded organisations. A number in Scotland, including the fantastic one in Fife that I visited, virtually, it has to be said, a couple of months ago.
So even if they're not actually living in the UK at the moment, but they do have residency, they can apply from their home country?
Well, I think we probably say if they've got residency here, for example, they've got permanent residency, they can, and actually, if you have settled status, just be clear on that, if you've already got your settled status and you move abroad, you can be out the UK for up to 5 years when the status is still active. And some people have asked what you actually need to do to continue the 5 years, and that's literally come into the UK. So if people have got settled status, it's up to 5 years. And if people are making applications and their application's already in and they already qualified for permanent residence, then again we would process their application. And probably if it might be helpful to be Ms. Rousing talk about the more technical side of how we deal with the application process, but certainly and just to reassure people, we've also, if people are out the UK temporarily over Christmas and things like that, that makes no difference to their application.
It's about people who haven't yet applied, and I know there's been efforts from the UK and the Scottish Government to encourage people to apply and get their applications in early. We know there are still people who haven't applied, and the timescales, as you say, run until June, so they do have time to do it. But they're either trying to apply for settled or pre-settled status, and because of COVID, if you're somebody who works in the tourism sector, it's a possibility, your sector's been shut down, and it's maybe been a need for you to move home, either to look after family or accommodation needs, or for different reasons. People have decided to go back to their home country for a period of time because of COVID. Can they apply from their home country if they've not got an application yet? They're still to apply.
Yeah, if they're, again, it's impossible to go into every single scenario. But the principle is, if for sake of argument you've been working here for 5 years, you'd have your national insurance number, we'd have your national insurance records. You could apply, use your NI number as your evidence of residence in the UK and of your time. We would then check the NI records and contributions that you've paid, and on that basis, and declare criminal convictions. I must say, vast majority that only applies to a very small percentage of EEA nationals. And then that would be processed. But you can apply from abroad, if you have your thing. The thing we look for, though, of course, is the evidence of residence in the UK, and beyond the 31st of December, looking for evidence of residence in the UK before the end of the transition period. But if you've temporarily gone home to stay with family, as you touched on, if, for example, your accommodation in the tourism industry was linked potentially to the hotel you're working in, we saw those disgraceful scenes earlier this year when one hotel decided to close and literally put its staff out onto the street. If that sort of scenario is where the reason why you're temporarily at home with family, one, we'd say go onto the online system. Most people, it's an online application. If there's any problems, do call the settlement resolution. If someone's temporarily left the UK, that shouldn't infringe their position. Certainly, someone who's left in recent months.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Thank you very much. Our next questioner is Dean Lockhart, MSP.
Thank you very much, convener, and good morning, Minister. Thanks for joining us this morning. I wanted to follow up on the discussions over the impact of the COVID pandemic, because official figures show that the pandemic could see unemployment across the UK rise towards 2.5, 2.6 million, unfortunately, with many young people entering the workforce facing the most adverse consequences. So given the significance of this impact, which is going to be an impact on the short term and unfortunately potentially the medium term, how will this influence UK government immigration policy in order to make sure young people have the very best chance of securing unemployment in these very difficult circumstances?
Well, thank you for the question. And we can already see some of the impact. For example, from your own area, you look at the unemployment figures for Fife at the end of October. It was something like just under 15,000 people are claiming unemployment-related benefits. That is a huge number, and it's a real challenge. We just cannot have a lost generation to the employment market. So where we're clear with the migration policy is we accept that there are certain skills that take time to train, that are in short supply, or where employers want to be able to recruit a globally mixed team. Many businesses operate on a global basis now. They want to look at recruiting across them. But then that comes to the second part of our migration system, which is saying that actually for those jobs where the level of training needed is less, the skills are more general, that the first focus should be looking to recruit in the domestic market. And it's quite odd in some ways to pair up an argument of that there's going to be, for example, large-scale employment with the idea there's going to be a labour shortage, and therefore we need to expand immigration. It's quite an odd economic argument to pair up. So our focus is that in the first instance, alongside these support packages being offered by the UK government, for example, things like the JET scheme to get people into work, that actually we want employers to focus first on the domestic market, giving young people, particularly in Scotland, those opportunities in sectors where they can get their first foot on the employment ladder. But then on the second side, immigration is still there for the skills and talents that may take longer to train and may be genuinely in short supply. So that's where we believe this focus is. It's immigration is to support our strategy for the UK labour market, not provide an alternative to it.
Thanks very much. And I've asked this question to the Scottish Government when the relevant minister appeared before us. I'm assuming there's in terms of the policy response, there's a holistic whole-of-government response going on here. So in other words, your department is working with the Skills and Education Department, with BEIS and other departments to make sure immigration, the skills agenda and the needs of the economy are being met in this difficult time.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I've been quite keen that we need to stop debating immigration as a completely separate concept. You know, having one day having a debate on how we need to get people back into work and the next day having a debate how we should fill all jobs and vacancies via immigration. What we have to do is to link them together. And myself and the Employment Minister in the Department for Work and Pensions find it quite interesting sometimes to compare notes between ourselves of some employers who are very keen to get a meeting with me, yet haven't been quite so keen to get a meeting with her, and to talk about how, in the first instance, they can look to DWP for support recruiting domestically, the skills and skins, and I presume the same would be the case if I was talking to a counterpart in the Scottish Government around what they're. But for me, it's about immigration should be there as the support where you can't, not where you won't get involved with training schemes, where you don't want to be part of the schemes to get people back to work, where you're not looking to offer apprenticeships, or in terms of some key workers, where you want an option to always pay the minimum wage rather than offering the type of package that those working in frontline roles deserve. So that's where I think it does need to be considered as a joined up part of an overall approach to the labour market, both in Scotland and the rest of the UK, rather than as something that we debate completely separate. As I say, yeah, certainly across government, and certainly we think as UK government, that we're with sectors saying, if you're struggling to recruit, then you need to be talking to DWP, BEIS, Scottish Government, devolved administrations, and the Home Office, not saying, actually, I'm just going to go straight and talk to the Home Office.
Thanks very much. And Convener, a very quick follow-up, if I may. We've heard evidence that immigration in some sectors and from some countries has dropped off in recent years. I wonder if you, and this might not be directly a question for you, it might be more of a financial question, but I wonder to what extent the impact of exchange rate can be relevant in terms of the fluctuation of sterling. Obviously, we've seen a depreciation of sterling in recent years. To what extent that is a factor in play in terms of the decisions of some people whether or not to come to this country when the exchange rate has, compared to their home currency, sterling is perhaps no longer such an attractive currency to be paid in?
I think inevitably people thinking of moving across the world to take up jobs and opportunities will look at what the value of the package they're going to get, and almost certainly will compare it in first instance, like most of us would, if we were thinking of migrating. So we'd look at, well, what's that equivalent in our own local currency? So it probably has had some, but also we also need to look at the fact that just creating migration opportunities doesn't automatically mean people will move. If there are strong and rewarding job opportunities in their own economy, that will have an impact. And we can see, for example, Eastern Europe, economies have moved on and developed dramatically since the end of communism 30 years ago. Some are becoming very strong. Wage rates are starting to rise in many of those economies, and in some cases becoming more and more comparable to what you'd expect to see in Western Europe in a range of sectors. So inevitably, those factors play out when the people then decide, well, they should migrate. Because what people are looking at is, what's the economic opportunity for me? What is the goal? What am I going to get? What's the lifestyle I'm going to have? What's the goal? Now, I think that gives some great opportunities, having a global system in terms of selling the fact that Scotland is a great place to live, locate, and for people to live out their aspirations and dreams. But, we have to look at the fact that, yes, people will look at a range of factors inside, including, basically what bang they get for their buck, or pounders in this case.
Thanks very much, Minister, and back to you, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next questioner is Stuart Stevenson, MSP.
Good morning, Minister. I want to just talk about one particular industry in the first instance before my second question, coming on to a slightly different topic. My parliamentary constituency is the one that historically has been the second lowest unemployment in Scotland. With a bit of an issue in the oil industry. We're now down to the 5th. We have, as one of our major industries, fishing. That's both catching, where there are large numbers of Filipinos, approximately 500 employed, and processing, where if you look at Peterhead, there are 28 languages in the academy, and if you look at Fraserburgh, 24 languages in the school in Fraserburgh, which tells you something about the international character. 70% of the people who work in processing are non-UK nationals, and about 50% of those who come to our area want to, in due course, bring their families and settle permanently. But huge numbers, not because necessarily administrative difficulties are an issue, although they are viewed by some as being so, but perhaps more the psychology of the UK no longer being a welcoming place for immigrants. We have hundreds of vacancies in our factories. Indeed, the number of people employed in fish processing factories exceeds the total unemployment register in the northeast of Scotland. And I know that processors have made very substantial efforts right across the UK, particularly focusing on areas of high unemployment, to recruit people to work. So what do you think a major fish processing factory in the Broch should be doing to fill those hundreds of vacancies they currently have under the current rules?
Well, thank you for the question, Stuart, and it's interesting to hear the example. And what first I'd say is that the message I believe we're sending out via our new migration system that will judge you by the talent and skills you have, not by where your passport was issued, I think actually gives a very positive message about the view the UK and Scotland takes on migration. And it's positive to hear how many people have been welcomed to your own community, and particularly the change in the settlement figure, again, from the mid-35,000 down to the same criteria as the skilled worker visa, will enable more people to settle in Grampian. And turning to the fishing industry, as you said, your constituency includes Peterhead. I also get very regular opportunities to speak with the Member of Parliament and House of Commons about the fishing industry, and I've engaged directly with fish processors and those operating in the industry in your area. First, again, I would say, whilst I accept that traditionally with the oil and gas industry, Aberdeen has had a very strong, and Aberdeenshire more widely, very strong economic pull, very welcome, and there are concessions which we're continuing in the new migration system around that industry, just as an aside. But we're still, there were 6,610 people in Aberdeenshire on unemployment-related benefits back in October, which, again, I know you'll be concerned about, as I am. So in the first instance, we'd want to see the fish processing industry offering opportunities, trying to get help, support, and get people back to work. But secondly, if people do bring their families over, by the way, in terms of family, those over 18 who arrive, partners actually have general rights to work in the United Kingdom, and those who arrive as a skilled worker who bring their partner who's over 18, again, they have generic rights to work in the UK. They don't have, they're not tied to the sector or to the job that the skilled worker is working in. We have our route opening up in terms of settlement with Hong Kong, which I hope to know from certainly speaking to the MP for Bamford Buchan. Very much looking forward to welcoming many people to that community, and I think there's some amazing quality of life offer that Grampian can make to those who would be moving from one of the most crowded cities in the world to relocate and take up roles of employment. And again, as we've assured, actually a lot of jobs in the fish processing industry are at RQF 3 and above, the school leaver and level. We shouldn't just assume that they're all low-skilled, minimum wage. They're not. And again, one of the things we need to break about an image of some of the industry in people's minds is that these aren't low-paid jobs, certainly in the fishing sector, from engaging with those actually setting the catches. Some of the rewards are very strong and very good. There's some really good opportunities there that we want more people to see. And particularly with coming out of the Common Fisheries Policy, I think we can start a much stronger narrative about the future of fishing, because for too long the narrative, let's be honest, domestically has been that this is an industry in the CFP that's in decline and isn't one that perhaps you see a future in. Whereas I think now coming out of the Common Fisheries Policy, we can really see a prospect for growth in the industry, a prospect for a real future and opportunity. And again, that's a message that we're very keen to support the industry in putting forward and making.
Well, Minister, I think my esteemed colleague, Mr. Duguid, of a different political persuasion than I, would share an interest in seeing success. I would say the catching sector has grown dramatically over the last 20 years, and financially is doing much better than it's done before, but is under very real threat because there is no use in landing 100% more fish if there is no capacity to sell that fish into the traditional markets and fewer people working in the processing sector. Between them, we're talking about a 1.2 billion. However, not all of that lies in your ministerial responsibilities, ministers. So let me just move on to the other thing I want to pursue, because I heard many warm words on that first one, but I'm not sure I heard the solution. The other thing I think that you yourself referenced the Highlands and other parts of the United Kingdom, and recognising that there are diverse needs for employment and for sourcing employees right across the islands. But recognising that Scotland has different needs, how many Scottish officials are part of the team that's been working to formulate policy in this area?
Well, certainly the Home Office is a UK body, so we work across our United Kingdom, and, for example, have major operations in Glasgow, which I've visited myself. So, and actually, ultimately, the policy formulation is done in the House of Commons, and we obviously welcome the support of the Scottish members representing Scottish constituencies in that as well. And I do regularly meet my SNP colleague, who is very constructive feedback. We don't go on everything, of course, though.
Do forgive me, Minister. Historically, and when I was a minister, I've represented the UK as a minister from the UK on occasions, sat in the front chair at European Council meetings on behalf of the UK, and so on. And in fisheries negotiations, it's been our fisheries officials who've been part of the negotiating team. But as we've dealt with Brexit in particular, none of the Scottish officials appear to have been included in the teams in fishing, despite the fact that internationally they're recognised as the key experts. Now, that doesn't sound like a team game. You're correct, and I accept that ultimately the policy has to be set in London. But what I'm asking is, what have you done to draw in officials with particular expertise in employment and so on and so forth, who understand, to actually make a contribution in the room, not simply by sending a letter in, but in the room, to help you develop a policy that does reflect the diverse needs of all the parts of these islands and the four nations that are part of it?
Well, I'm certainly happy in terms of on the officials question. Perhaps actually might be worth Ms. Rouse talking about the work we've done in terms of direct engagement with officials in the devolved administrations, and given some of the input and feedback that we've had there. That's been very welcome and very strong in helping us form our policies. Perhaps it might be better if Ms. Rouse comes in on this point.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Convener. So we have regular meetings with officials from all of the four home nations, and I think have some really positive input from your officials in terms of engagement. As Minister highlighted at the beginning, of course we don't agree on everything, but we do hear a lot directly from them. But we also do a lot of work to get out and about, to hear directly from Scottish businesses, Scottish organisations. We have a regular series of advisory groups which are well represented by a wide range of organisations like CBI Scotland, Scottish Chamber of Commerce, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish TUC, University of Scotland, and and as well as actually getting out and about and doing specific events with Scottish groups. So the Minister did an event with MFU Scotland last week, and have also had events recently with COSLA with the tech sector. So, and I think from a policy perspective, in terms of designing the new policy for the future border and immigration system, I've always been really impressed and grateful with the kind of the degree to which Scottish businesses really lean in and want to come and talk to us, want to share their ideas, want to share what their views on what the future system should look like. And as the Minister's highlighted, it genuinely is helping to shape policy and shape our thinking on the system that we launched last week.
Well, can I just finally, and I think this is my last issue, Convener, ask for some specific examples where Scottish Input has changed the policy, where policy specifically reflects. And I'm not expecting it to be zero. I'm not asking because I think it'll be zero. I really genuinely want to hear.
Okay, let's read through some things that have been response to Scottish stakeholders. I must say also some feedback as well across the rest of the UK, but certainly one specific that Scottish stakeholders raised. We had the settlement figure, which at the time for skilled worker, which was in the mid, under the old system, was in the mid 30,000s, but reduced to the general threshold for settlement to 25,600. Median salary for Scotland is £16 higher than that, and also no time limit on the route, so you can work towards getting ILR. That was the feedback we got in terms of Scotland, in terms of the impact of the previous threshold and one that we changed. We've also allowed transfers into it, skilled worker from the ICT route. So if someone is working in an international company, comes into Scotland, likes it, wants to stay more permanently, they don't have to leave the UK to apply for a skilled worker visa for a job that they're actually already doing. The student post-study visa in July 2021, 2 years for completion of a graduate level degree, 3 years at PhD. Actually, that was asked for by the Scottish Government. Also, the first request actually made by actually an SNP MP in an Opposition Day debate they called on immigration. That'll be coming in July 2021. To be clear, those students studying in Scottish universities this year will qualify for it, and if they're distance learning, provided they're here by April, physically in the UK, they will qualify. That's more relevant for those who are on 1 year taught master's courses. We've also removed the time limit on the student route for postgraduate study, something picked up by Scottish University because the 4-year degree structure in Scotland, that actually the route then acted in a way that put quite pressure on someone looking, particularly if they were looking to do a PhD afterwards. So actually it made more sense just to remove the time limit for postgraduate study. That's a benefit in England, but it's particularly in response to the fact that the previous time limit under the old Tier 4 route had much more of an impact on students going on to postgraduate study who'd done a 4-year Scottish degree, so we removed it. We also did a range of changes to the student route, and again, very grateful for places like Glasgow University and Edinburgh University, their involvement with that. We got rid of whilst you won't see it so much as just as a policy, but there was quite an area, some quite pointless bureaucracy. For example, my favourite, and Mr. Rouse, another one I'm going to give, was ATAS requirements for students from some of our closest allies. ATAS, for those not familiar with it, is a programme to stop people learning weapons programs, learning info of interest for programs of weapons of mass destruction. It was rather bizarre that we were asking students from New Zealand to get a certificate in those areas. Again, another one we did in response to our request from Scotland, again, similarly across the UK, around particularly English language teaching, was to allow short-term study for up to 6 months under the standard visitor route, rather than having to apply for a separate visa. The previous limit was, I think, 20 or 30 days. It wasn't very generous. It produced messing around for people who'd arrived as non-visa nationals, in theory, flying to Paris and flying back. It was really not delivering, but that was a specific request. We're changing the rather antiquated entry through Ireland rules. We're going to allow committed paid engagement. That has a particular impact, I'm going to say, for Northern Ireland, but it also has an impact in terms of someone coming from Ireland to Scotland to perform. This relates to a non-visa national, for sake of argument, who's in a band coming to perform a gig, or an actor coming to perform a particular play for up to 28 days. Again, that helps on the cultural offer. We reformed the global talent reforms, particular thought there when we did around the change on research products and accredited research was thinking, particularly Glasgow University's team, that's very much based between Malawi and Glasgow around malaria research. That removed some of the bureaucracy for them of having to, keep count of how many days one researcher spent in Malawi versus Glasgow. That was one of the things, again, specifically reacting to a situation in Scotland. Again, we're also now starting down the path of the simplification and review of our family rules, and that's one the Scottish Government has called for, and it's certainly something we're looking at. And then the final one, which is something new for today for the committee, is the permit-free festival system, which I think the Edinburgh Festival has some good points, International has some good points on. To be clear, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll over this year's list to next year. I don't see any point in asking festivals this year to reapply, given the unique circumstances of what happened. And what I actually think is the Home Office should have as mature a relationship with the Edinburgh International Festival as it has with Edinburgh University from an immigration point of view. When we work in partnership to deliver one of the world's greatest cultural events, not pretend each year we might effectively cancel it if they don't fill out a form correctly. That doesn't strike me as the sort of relationship we should have. We would, like we do with universities, retain the right to take action if there was flagrant abuse, but that's not an issue at the Edinburgh Festival. We're looking at how we can take it to a multi-year process following next year, and again to reassure any of the festivals that's on the permit-free festival list that we will be very flexible over the next year, given if they can get their festival on. That's what we want people to do, is try and get it on if they can, not be worrying about the immigration assessment that might follow, because we want to move to a multi-year system. That's a direct response to stakeholders in Scotland. I understand something the Scottish Government's also discussed as well, but it's one we particularly want to look at alongside them for smaller festivals, looking at how paid permitted engagement under our visitor route can work slightly more effectively for them. That's perhaps the big one that I can certainly say today, Madam Convener. That's actually a new announcement that we were due to make, but I thought it'd be helpful to share it with the committee today, given it directly relates to requests from Scotland.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to move on to Ross Greer.
Thank you, Convener. Minister, I'm presuming that we can agree this year's shown us just how skilled and essential care workers are, but under your new immigration system, your government's new immigration system, 8 in 10 UK care workers who are EU citizens wouldn't have been eligible to come here, largely because of the arbitrary salary threshold that you've set. In July, your government announced that care workers would not be included in the fast-track visa scheme that you introduced. Only more senior roles like team leaders would be. The Royal College of Nursing said that your plans fall short of what's needed and they'll directly impact patient care. So having presumably gained a greater understanding of what care workers do over the course of this year, do you now accept the RCN were right and that your plans need to change in relation to care workers?
Well, first, thanks for the question. As you're right, we've certainly seen the value of care in our whole healthcare system over the last 10 months, and certainly one of the reasons why we wanted to launch the health and care visa relatively quickly, and we did so based on the existing skilled worker provisions, was to ensure it was in place rather than wait till the new system and the new thresholds that would come in at school leaver. I think one thing I would say though, if anyone thinks that what we should reward our care workers with after their efforts this year is an immigration policy that ensures their employers never need to pay them more than the minimum wage, I don't think that's a particularly positive outlook for the care sector. What we've said is we believe that where there are definitive skills, and the RQF3 senior care assistant does qualify under the new skilled worker system. We are about to confirm what in the 3, 4 and 5 will qualify under health and care visa. Obviously, until we've made certain assessments, caveat what I say, but I can certainly say it's highly likely that senior care assistants will be included in that. Where they're coming to work for the NHS, we need to work on some details around how social care, and obviously where it's integrated, it's slightly more simple than where it isn't, because we do purely private medicine. So, for example, a doctor coming purely to work in a Harley Street clinic is not someone we include in the health and care visa unless they're doing NHS work as well. So we think that actually it's about making sure that our immigration policy sits alongside our other policies for health and social care. And we'll return to the same points we've made a few minutes ago. The healthcare sector is a place where we could get many people back into work. It's a place where I think we need to have a balance between how we make sure that the skills that are more difficult to train and aren't so available are able to be accessed more simply through immigration and recruitment on a global basis, but at the same time make sure that actually we're not using the migration system as an alternative to improving terms and conditions for people who do vital roles. And just to give an example, even under our current migration rules for the non-EEA, it's something like 10,000 non-EEA nationals are working in health and social care in Scotland, having arrived under our existing migration rules. So we would expect that that number may grow, given the fact that people will arrive, for example, as dependents of skilled workers, the Hong Kong route, and more people qualifying for skilled work roles. But those figures also include those in the higher qualification areas.
Thank you. Your argument significantly here rests on this idea that we should be improving conditions in the care sector, and I would agree absolutely on that. Care workers are paid an outrageously low level. In that case, I have to ask, you said yourself that you should be marrying this up with wider health and social care policy. If you want to raise the wages of these individuals, why not do the easiest thing at your disposal, which is to immediately raise the minimum wage above the poverty level it's currently set at? That would not only raise the wages of most people who work, a huge number of people who work in the care sector, but it would immediately lift hundreds of thousands of families out of poverty. If raising wages and improving conditions is your goal, why not do the easiest thing at your disposal and automatically raise the wages of the lowest workers in society?
Well, first, as I say, the minimum, the national living wage isn't my direct immigration brief, but certainly we're guided by the Low Pay Commission in what it advises. And of course, at the moment, there is a sensitive balance in parts of tourism, retail, and others between how I think both aspiration we share. We probably have different ways of getting there, of seeing people having better and more rewarding packages when they're in work. But again, I accept in the long run, we need to, certainly south of the border in England, we need to have a discussion around the long-term funding of social care. As north of Scotland, that'll be a devolved discussion and debate around exactly what the balances are in the future to ensure that, when we look ahead, we look at the demographic changes. I represent an area where one ward, 9% of the entire population is aged 86 or over. That means we are going to see pressures and a need to have a strong care sector that has a strong recruitment pattern locally. But one of the things I found when I came into this role and when I was meeting with some in the care sector, so not all, some, was that the first phone call was to immigration all the time. And when I sat there and asked, well, you want to really value your staff, can I just check you don't actually want a route at the minimum wage? And I got silence. That rather said to me where the challenge we've got in making sure this is seen as a valuable role. It's seen as a role that wants to move on. And the chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, in his evidence sent before the Immigration Bill Committee, was very, very clear that actually the people who gain from a special route for care workers, which people are arguing for, are actually its employers, not the care workers themselves.
I don't think it's particularly credible for you to talk about paying people the minimum wage as if it's a problem when your government won't raise the minimum wage. It is currently set at a poverty wage. It's not possible to work full-time on a minimum wage and not live in poverty. But moving back to part of your answer to my first question.
The minimum wage is increasing in April, by the way, but,
Not increasing to the real living wage. You call it the national living wage, it's not the real living wage. It is impossible to work full time on that and live above the poverty line. This is a defined measurement and you're simply not raising it to that level. You never have. But going back to your first answer, your answer to my first question, you mentioned the health and care worker visa. Now, you also mentioned senior care assistants. That's not the overwhelming majority of people who work in social care. The overwhelming majority of people who work in social care wouldn't be covered by the health and care worker visa or the shortage occupation list or the skilled worker list. Have you done any impact assessment on what your policies will actually do to the workforce in the social care sector?
Well, first, the overwhelming majority of people who work in social care wouldn't be covered by health and care visa because they're actually UK or Irish citizens. So, or those with, and then those with EUSS status, again, similarly, won't be covered by the health and care visa either. And also those who are, for example, the non-EEA nationals in the roles you've talked about would already be on working routes that give them a generic right to work in the United Kingdom. So again, I think there are routes there. Where we have looked at the impact. Yes, some of the impact is we might see a need to pay care workers slightly more to attract larger numbers of people into work. I don't think we disagree. You and I might disagree on other things. I think we would agree on the idea that it's not a negative outcome to see care workers see a raise in their wages. But also we do still have, ultimately, we will keep the system under review, and we agreed as part of the package of the immigration bill to look at having, and it will be a four nations one. We will look to cover the whole of the UK with the assessment around the impacts for social care of ending free movement. But where we're really going to is, we are going to have a global system that judges people by what talents and skills they have to offer the UK, rather than fundamentally a two-tier one where some people are judged by their passport, where people fundamentally judged by their passport in the first instance. So we'll keep the sector under review. But I think I want to be clear as the immigration minister that I'm not going to reward care workers for the great work they've done this year with an immigration system that helps their employers always pay them the legal minimum. And I don't think that's a reward that many people across Scotland would wish to give them.
One final question, Convener. I mean, clearly, if you sorry, have we not got time?
Ross, because we've only got the Minister until 10:30, and there's several other members.
Actually, just to help, Convener, given the delay to start the meeting, I'm happy to continue to 2:45 if that allows some extra questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Minister. I do appreciate that. Ross, are you finished your line of questioning?
I want other members to come in that case. If there's time at the end, it'd be great to come back, but otherwise let's move on and let other members in.
Okay, thank you very much. And now move on to Kenneth Gibson, MSP.
Very much, Convener, and I'll try and be quick also. The shortage occupation list was a feature of Tier 2 general work, and of course is a Scotland only SOL, and the Migration Advisory Committee recommended that in Scotland there should be, there are differences with the UK, and that housing officers, nursery nurses and assistants, childminders and related occupations should be added to that, but the UK government has decided not to do that. Could you explain why that is, given the necessity of attracting people to those sectors? And the fact that, I should say incidentally before Minister you answer, is there's a lot of talk about bringing people into jobs, UK citizens, and that's understandable and that's very desirable, and we all want to see that. But there are clearly a lot of people who don't want to do these jobs regardless of the wages paid, and there are also people for whom it's not appropriate for a whole variety of reasons, and who may not have the skills or aptitude or attitude for these. So it's not always just a situation whereby you can replace a migrant by somebody locally. They may not be the appropriate person. So anyway, about the SOL, I'm just wondering if you can respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll briefly respond to the commentary, and I'll quickly come on to the SOL. I think we should be careful in saying that people are unemployed at the moment because they haven't got an attitude to do a job or something. And it's why I say the balance in our system of we recognise there are skills that you can't quickly train. For the sake of argument, nursing, which are very, very skilled, very top professional, where you do need to be able to recruit more generally. Hence, we've broadened the skill level and the skills that apply and are considered as part of the skilled worker visa. But the other way around, we don't, particularly looking at some of the numbers in Scotland in particular at the moment and across the UK, I think the idea that people are unemployed just because they don't want to do particular jobs is not one that I think many would agree with. But in terms of turning to the shortage occupation list, then yes, the vast majority, of course, of shortage occupations that were assessed by the MAC will be exactly the same across the whole of the UK, with those included for Scotland, for example, chemical scientists within the nuclear industry. We haven't rejected what the MAC has said, and we're giving careful consideration to it, in particular looking at some of the areas around things like bricklaying and others, where we've seen some evidence that the number of people domestically training for those roles is increasing quite significantly at the moment, for reasons I think we can both realise why those are. So the couple of events that are happening between now and certainly April. One, we've got free movement still runs to the end of the 31st of December, and we are still welcoming people from the European Union under free movement until the end of this year. The second is we are launching probably one of the biggest settlement routes from outside of Europe that we've launched in a very long time, which is the Hong Kong British nationals overseas settlement route. To give the figure, we estimate up to 5.4 million people could be eligible for that. It's quite hard to predict exactly where the numbers will be. So if you've read the impact assessment, they'll see it says anything between potentially 20,000 and 100,000 in the first year may arrive in the United Kingdom. We look forward to welcoming, I know many members of this committee will look forward to welcoming, hopefully many of them to Scotland in particular. That impact, and plus where we are with the pandemic generally, we can now see the corner being turned with the vaccine. We do need to look at where we are with the labour market in the early part of next year, and that means that we felt it's appropriate to look at those three situations, see also what level of applications we get under the new job codes, because those that would be on the shortage occupation list but pretty much are already ones that you can apply for skilled worker. The difference is you don't get the discount on the salary rate that the shortage occupation listing would provide. So we haven't rejected the MAC's views. We're assessing and analysing them, and we look forward to bringing forward decisions in the early part of next year on them.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't think it's an issue about people not wanting to work. It's about people who feel they don't want to work in particular sectors. There's plenty of sectors that I don't want to work in, and I'm sure there are plenty you don't want to work in, but there's other issues. I mean, for example, the travel to work is an issue. So I've got islands in my constituency whereby there's a very high level of proportion of elderly people. And no matter how much you pay, there is simply not enough younger people willing to work in the sector, the care sector, to ensure that we have the provision that's required for the rapidly ageing and increasingly frail population. And that's why immigration in that care sector is a necessity. So, I mean, surely the much more flexibility needs to be brought in terms of that, if we're to ensure that these areas are getting for these elderly frail people get the care they require. And just lastly, because I realise we're running out of time, the UK government wants to have a high wage, high skilled and high productivity economy. No one would disagree with that. But is that actually possible? Everyone can have a high wage, high skill and be highly productive. And if so, when would that be achieved?
Well, as you say, none of us are going to say we want to aspire for a sector to be low wage, low skill and poor productivity. That would be a bizarre thing to aim for. And I would just gently say I'm not sure whether many younger people would in North Ayrshire would necessarily agree that the reason they're unemployed is because they're not willing to work in the care sector. But returning to the specific point that's made, first, the challenges around logistics and around transport, of course, transport policy being devolved. Again, those issues apply to domestic job seekers as well as those are trying to seek and attract migration to the islands. And there are some obviously distinct advantages that I know you'll certainly recognise of the island life, some quality of life that's there. And to reassure you, following a request, I must say, from a Scottish SNP MP, we are looking at how we incorporate Scots Gaelic into the language requirements of the points-based system. But I would say, again, it's where we go back to, if we're saying that people, what packages are offered, well, again, attractive packages to be offered, and just turn to immigration for a minimum wage recruitment, that isn't necessarily going to solve the problem that's being talked about. And when we looked in the Bill Committee about suggestions of, for example, one advanced by a Scottish MP was around having a migration system, given the variety between, for example, Edinburgh and the Highlands in terms of salary rates. Actually, we could do it as a council area. It quickly helped, because my experience of Argyll and Bute, pointing out how close parts of it were to Glasgow, quickly became an island migration scheme, which just didn't seem particularly practical at all. So we will monitor the situation. We will monitor what the impacts are with the labour market, but we will come back to our core points is that, one, we'll do this on a global basis. We won't have separate EEA, non-EEA schemes anymore. The second is that we will want to see that employers are making the efforts they can to get people back into work. And, I'm just not prepared to accept the idea that there's hundreds of people in parts of Scotland who just are unemployed just because they're not willing to work in the care sector. I think that some would find quite strange an argument at the moment to be putting forward. And then on top of that, where there are needs for specific skills that take longer to train, which is the definition of what we look at, that will make sure there's easy and clear access to them, particularly for nursing and medical services that we know genuinely struggle through it, and where there's a shortage across the UK, no matter what an employer tried in terms of the numbers that actually is recruited into those roles, and we've made it simpler and easier to help support the type of care that people you mentioned need.
Thank you for that. But I have to say, I think the Minister is well aware that there are many people who don't feel that they have the aptitude or empathy to deal with older people, for example, care homes. I mean, my mother's over 80, she's in a care home. I know that I couldn't do that job. I just couldn't do that job. I mean, and I'm sure there are many people who feel the same way. So it's not just a question of putting square pegs in round holes. You have to be able to attract people who have the right social skills, empathy, affinity to older people who want to do that job, who would enjoy doing that job. And I simply feel that the Minister's not being realistic here. We know fine well that that's the situation, and instead of just saying, taking a view that, I'm sure everybody would be happy to do that job. I mean, that's just not the case. And I think you have to look at this realistically if we're actually going to get this long-term solution we have. And in terms of the care sector, the Conservative government's been in power for 10 years. And you're still talking about, having to look at this sector and how we would actually, decide on how we can best take it forward. I mean, there's been plenty of time how we would adequately fund it. I mean, I just think you've been somewhat disingenuous in your answers, Minister, I'm afraid.
Well, last time I looked, health and care policy in Scotland was a devolved responsibility, and I didn't realise my party had been in government there for the last 10 years. But let's stick with the general flavour of the talk about immigration. And we touched on earlier, we need to have a debate south of the border as well about funding. And I'd say, has everyone got the skills for care? Probably not. But I think the idea that, and we see particularly some of the tragic news coming out the high street, coming out some of the hospitality industry as well, of what the impacts we've seen over recent months. There are some people who've got great customer service, who are able to empathise and deal with, many of whom would have been dealing with older customers as well, who actually supporting them into the care sector. And yes, there is a debate to be had, but about how we have a long-term solution. That would be one for the Scottish Government and Scottish Parliament in terms of Scotland, and obviously the UK Government more wide in terms of England. But I do think if we're looking at immigration as the solution and first port of call, then that's the wrong place to start. And for me, I'm clear that we do want to see a care industry that offers the type of packages, rewards that are there. And we will monitor the situation. We're going to do the review we promised to do as part of the immigration bill. But I think we need to also be, when we're talking about the care industry, if we just give the impression that our vision for it is of paying low wages and making sure that can happen via immigration for whatever reasons we think that's a good idea, then that isn't going to attract people in, the very people, the skills and empathy, as you said, are currently looking after your father, my dad, in a care home as well. It's some great care and great service from those who work with them. And I want to see the immigration policy debate as a part of a coordinated approach to it, not seen as the solution to this issue.
Yeah, no one says it has to be low wages.
We're going to have to move on.
Yeah, I understand, Convener. Thanks, Minister.
Okay, thanks very much, Kenneth. We now move to Gordon Lyndhurst. Gordon, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you very much. And after that, Christine Graham, if she wants to come in. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Convener. I think I'm on broadcast, am I?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. Now, a concern raised with me by constituents in Lothian is rising population, in large part due to migration, and this is placing huge pressure on already insufficient housing, on healthcare, education, and infrastructure. We've already spoken about legal migration, but that is, of course, only part of the picture, and I don't need to tell you, Minister, that immigration is reserved matter And the key to it is in the UK border control, as there appear to be few effective means of dealing with illegal immigrants internally, unlike in EU countries, other EU countries. So my question to you is, what is being done to stop the steady flow of illegal migrants into the UK, to ensure that immigration applications which are not being dealt with quickly and effectively will be dealt with quickly and effectively in the future? And what is being done to ensure the actual implementation of the decisions taken, rather than them being allowed to be simply ignored?
Okay, certainly, if I'd say it's no surprise to hear, of course, the attractions of living in Lothian are obvious, not just for those in the UK, but of course across the world as well. Given the understand again, one of the things we briefly talk about is that if we portray, Scotland itself has in Scotland there are other variations in the labour market that we see across the rest of the UK. So, for example, Lothian, very strong market, very strong attractions, and whereas in other parts, again, if we don't sort out the core issues about the economy in other parts, then again, just granting a visa that says 3 years in one area immediately moves to another. It's one of the reasons, in terms of abuse of the system, it's one of the reasons why we're not looking at having geographically linked visas, because, for example, the scheme that was for fresh talent working in Scotland quickly became known in the Home Office as the fresh talent moving to London visa, because sadly it was quite easy to do that as a result of the visa, having one of those visas. But in terms of the tackling illegal migration, we are clear that the system for dealing with it is broken, certainly around our asylum policies. Those with genuine claims are waiting far too long to get decisions, and others, whilst others are abusing it shamelessly to put up, I think it's safe to say, claims that sometimes can completely contradict the previous claim they put in. So we have pledged to make major reform of this in terms of how we can more effectively enforce our migration rules. At the same time, though, also learning the lessons from the past about making sure that we do deal with some of the complexity of our migration rules in terms of simplifying them. We're also looking at what we can do, particularly with France, around ensuring that illegal crossings of the channel, and particularly clandestine entry through when people take huge risks, many times facilitated by criminal gangs to come into the UK, how we can tackle and work harder to drive that down, and also within the UK itself, ensuring the balance between a compliant environment that makes sure that people who do not have the correct migration status are not able to access welfare benefits and public services, but at the same time ensuring that those who we have welcomed here and are making a valuable contribution to our society are able to continue doing so. So there is more work to be done. Certainly, Home Secretary has made very clear her view on the broken system around immigration enforcement, particularly around serious criminals that we sometimes struggle to remove when they abuse serially some of our protection provisions. And that's certainly legislation we plan to bring forward into the UK Parliament next year.
Thank you very much. Have you finished your line of questioning, Gordon?
I wonder if I might just come in briefly, Convener.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Yes, Minister, I mean, you are quite right that Lothian is a very attractive place to live and work. And, many people move here, and of course they're welcome. And I'm more, of course, in my question interested in the difficulties that arise where we're not talking about people who come in according to the system and where governments and local authorities can seek to plan the things that I talked about infrastructure and so on. And I'm interested, you touched on the question of asylum applications, and I think that was mentioned earlier regarding Glasgow. And you accept that there has been a difficulty in terms of the length of time taken. And in those cases, we're talking about a decision about whether the person, what their status is to be. So can you give us assurance that that will be properly resourced in the future to ensure fair, speedy and effective resolution of asylum claims so that people know where they're at, know what their status is?
Yeah, I think we need to look at our whole system. Some modernisation of it needed in terms of how we increasingly use digital systems. I must say, not to make decisions, but to ensure that decision makers can more easily access files, can make sure a decision is taken through. As they changing some of the systems so that they do not get people who, and in terms of serious foreign national offenders. We sometimes people who spent quite some time in our prisons who suddenly remember they've got an asylum claim the day before they leave. That sort of behaviour, and also allowing multiple resubmissions where literally contradictory information is put up. In certainly my colleague Minister Philp would be able to give some quite long examples of where people, for example, one week claimed they were Iranian, then their next asylum claimed they're potentially Iraqi, which is a pretty fundamental difference in terms of making an asylum claim. But on the other side, yeah, we do have people waiting too long. I had a good example brought by a Glasgow MP of a group of people who've been waiting 18 months for their first interview due to the lack of an interpreter in a particular language being found by the contractor the Home Office uses. Well, looking to be more creative and work with communities, which we could have done, would have been in the interest of both sides. A speedier decision for those who are making the claim, and also for the Home Office, actually more effective evidence by more quickly interviewing before there's chances to perhaps prepare for an interview. So again, for both sides, there's a common interest in this, and look at then how we resource that to make sure we have a fair system, but one that's firm if people are trying to abuse it. That's the goal. And as I say, late in the new year, we'll be looking to bring forward legislation to the House of Commons that will set out more clearly what the plans for the future and how we aim to achieve that, alongside some of the more procedural things we could do to help improve and speed up the system. Because we do recognise there are some people who are waiting too long for decisions.
Okay, Gordon, are you finished now?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks very much. Now bring in Christine Graham, MSP.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good morning, Minister. I've listened this morning. Good morning. I've listened throughout to the evidence, and I know you've had various discussions with various sectors on migration as it impacts in Scotland. You referred to engagement with MPs, with SNP MPs, and with officials. And I may have missed this, but I never heard you mention engagement with Scottish ministers, in particular with Ben McPherson, the Minister for Migration. If I've missed it, forgive me, but I hope you would repeat it if I have missed it. Can you advise when and how often there's been engagement with Minister Ben McPherson over this year?
Well, look, the point I'd make on meeting with those with ministerial responsibilities in the Scottish Government is, look, I'm happy to meet those who've got devolved decision-making powers on the same basis as I meet ministers from the UK Government more widely. But where the point we've made is where Mr McPherson comes in. Of course, it's a spokesperson's role effectively, because there isn't devolved decision-making around migration. And most of the letters have been around requests to discuss things that fundamentally we are at odds on. We're not going to agree on. We're not going to agree to create a border within the United Kingdom for people. That would fundamentally alter how our economy, society and culture operates, to have that particularly on the Great Britain mainland. And we're not also going to meet to discuss providing an alternative to offering things like rewarding packages for social care workers. But, to be clear, if I'd meet devolved ministers in other contexts. So if Fergus Ewing wants a meeting about tourism and the visitor route, happy to have a conversation about that. The Minister for Business, Fair Work and Skills wants to talk to me about how our migration system can provide support to the skills objectives and policies that the Scottish Government wants to bring forward. Happy to do that. And if the communities and ministers and Ben want to come and have a chat about the BNO route and that major route to settlement we're launching in January, and how we can ensure many see the opportunity that Scotland presents to them, happy to do it, and I'll put the kettle on for them.
Well, I'm glad you're putting the kettle on. I hope you have scones as well. But I'm just asking, so you've had no meetings with Ben McPherson in 2020?
No, we haven't met Mr McPherson, no.
Has he asked for meetings?
He's sent letters asking for meetings on subjects. We've provided replies, and as I say, I don't. If a request for a meeting to discuss putting the border within the United Kingdom, I obviously have a clear view on that, and not one that I'm going to change.
Well, I don't expect you to change that, but are you saying that? I just want to clarify in my mind why there haven't been. Why you've gone around all absolutely perfect to go around various agencies and sectors, no problem with that. This is a bit disrespectful from my point of view, not to meet up with the Minister for Migration. You touch on other areas. Are you saying, is it because he only wanted to discuss issues such as a border and so on? It was the agenda that put you off. What was it?
Well, I think what we've said is I'm happy to meet ministers with devolved powers, and I meet the political spokesperson at Westminster for the SNP very regularly in terms of hearing a range of views and opinions. But in terms of political spokesperson from the devolved administration, well, I hear those views regularly from the SNP spokesperson at a national level. And apologies for that, my domestic phone going off. That's where we think, and again, we think that it's right that as the UK's migration minister responsible for this policy across the whole of the United Kingdom, that we engage directly with Scottish stakeholders, and already given quite a number of examples of where we've made changes, because actually some of the suggestions brought up in terms of Scotland make eminent sense to apply to the rest of the UK as well.
So have you had requests from other ministers in the Scottish Government to discuss on their portfolios?
No, not directly. I'm happy to receive them.
Well, I'll get back to my colleagues and get them to send a whole flurry of letters to you, perhaps with a Christmas card, and we'll see if you can have meetings with
that. No, in my previous briefs and roles, I regularly engaged with certainly the Welsh Government when I was in the Welsh office, and I also met Graham Day while I was the Minister for the Constitution, and Mike Russell dropped in as well, and we had obviously we have very different views on the constitutional future, but we had some conversations. I think what we would say is, though, immigration policy, and by the way, I say exactly the same to colleagues at Westminster, needs to be discussed in the context of wider policies. We can't just sit there discussing migration separately. So, for example, hearing a view on how many we should resettle and then not getting offers from the local authorities and from housing to do that. So that's where it is. But yeah, you've heard some examples of meetings. I'd be happy to agree. We've got the B&O route coming up with the community minister and Ben want to come and talk. But if we just want to talk migration rules, then in a complete isolation to the decision-making of the Scottish Government, and again, that's not really the most productive discussion.
Forgive me, Mr Foster, nobody thinks migration's in a silo.
Well, I have to say, sometimes, sadly, I get letters. I had one around the migration bill urging the UK government to do more resettlement. At the same time, I must say, not just from figures in Scotland. At the same time, we just put out an appeal, one for more resettlement places for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children from Kent, and also for our main resettlement scheme. Sadly, haven't received the type of replies that the policy statements would have indicated that we should have expected.
But I'm encouraged that if our ministers get in touch with you on their portfolios where migration impact on it, bridges will be built.
Well, for example, if Jenny Freeman wants to come and chat with me about the health and care visa and where it things, happy to see her.
Fine, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine and Minister. I'd like a brief supplementary to Christine's line of questioning, if I may. Because I've got a letter here in front of me. It's a joint letter from Ben McPherson and Jeremy Miles, MS, his counterpart in Wales. And that's dated the 1st of December. And they are reiterating an urgent request for a meeting between all four nations of the UK to discuss migration policy ahead of the 1st of January. And they point out that there was a roundtable meeting with your predecessor, the Right Honourable Caroline Nokes MP. Are you going to accede to that request from Wales and Scotland?
We're not planning. We'll be responding to them. We don't plan to reconvene the previous roundtables that purely focused on migration, but as touched on, I'm happy to have discussions focused around how migration fits in with other policy areas.
Is there, Ben McPherson has spoken about this in the Parliament, and he has said, notwithstanding his political differences with Caroline Nokes, she did engage with him, but you have not. Is there been a change of policy in the UK government that you are no longer going to be engaging with our migration minister?
Well, what we've said is we continue to engage with the devolved administrations. We've touched on a range of work we do both on a technical level and probably one of the most regular correspondence to the First Ministers around migration, around issues given the changes we're making and the notifications we give. But I think where we're clear is that when we're engaging as of both migration policy, we'll engage across the whole of the United Kingdom, including with political spokespersons, and Scottish National Party Stuart MacDonald being one of the most active, and to be fair, actually very constructive in some of the points he makes, and we found that very useful engagement. But where it's in terms of the devolved administrations expressing a political view on the migration, rather than necessarily we're dealing with those, for example, the Scottish Cabinet Secretary for Health, who will be employing directly, or the Housing Minister will be making decisions around what offers they make for resettlement to us. It's a bit odd to hear opinions on one sense and then get offers that may not necessarily follow through. But that's where we're. So no, we're not planning to reconvene the sort of Four Nations tables that happened under the May administration. We found that actually they resulted not in the most constructive of outcomes overall. It also saw stakeholders encouraged to think that they shouldn't engage directly with the UK government. We think people should, and that's actually been a benefit to the whole system, particularly with the changes we brought in. And as I say, some of the requests that were put up and made, including in some of the previous committees, were ones that we have actually said, good idea, let's put it across the whole of the UK, and that's from stakeholders directly in Scotland. So that's I've made clear the type of offers I'm prepared to make, and it's exactly the same as I adapt in terms of meeting colleagues in other departments at Westminster.
Okay, so that does seem to be a change of policy or change of approach, but thank you for the clarity on that. We are very pleased with your generosity, with your time. You've gone over time, so thank you very much. And also to your officials for coming to give evidence to us today.
Very happy to come back. Very happy to come back in the future.
We are now going to move into private session. Thank you very much, and I'll close this part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.